has destroyed
This
in
is just
Africa,
saying.
they also
Like,
destroyed
comment,
millions
subscribe.
of lives along with them. In the case of the leaders that the West has destroyed in Africa, they also destroyed millions of lives along with them. Millions of living and unborn lives have been destroyed in terms of their hopes, their opportunities, their rights, their freedom, their independence, their
Facts,
sovereignty.
rights.
Or you can
Comment,
trace
like,
the carnage going
subscribe.
on right
This
now
is
in
just
Congo
saying. I'm
today,
your host,
all
Kyra
the way back to
Pierce.
the
Bear with me
assassination of
with the
Patrice
video,
Lumumba.
please.
They assassinate the idea. They assassinate the man who represents the idea, so that future generations will look back and go, well, you know, they tried and they failed, so we better not bother. It's psychological warfare across time.
Thank you.
Because if you can make
Psychological
a people
warfare.
believe that liberation is
They've been
impossible,
entrapping us
if you
for a
can make them
very
believe
long
that
time.
wanting
Over
sovereignty
400
is
some
naive and
years.
that dignity is an unrealistic hope, then you don't even have to conquer them anymore. They'll remain conquered inside themselves.
Hello everyone, welcome once again to AfriPost. I hope wherever you're watching us from, you're having a great time. Now, many people have given their opinions about the way US is starting to treat Ibrahim Traore, that's the president of Burkina Faso. We know that United States is not happy about the defiance that he has towards Western powers, and that is something that is really setting him apart. Some people
I
who
like your
did
video.
similar things faced a lot of challenges. For example, Colonel Muammar Gaddafi was killed because of his desire to really end dollarization of African trade and have a common currency in Africa where we can trade within ourselves and have equal balance of trade. But then when United States and European leaders saw that Gaddafi was gonna let Africa liberate itself, they decided to eliminate him. This is the same case of what's going on with Ibrahim Traore. Michael Langley, the head of AFRICOM, has given a statement in the Senate saying that Ibrahim Traore is a dictator who is making a nuisance of himself in Burkina Faso, and therefore, United States is already targeting Ibrahim Traore. But then, while many people have given their opinions, one respected scholar on these issues, global geopolitics, Shaib Wolsen, has spoken about it. And without further ado, I want you to listen to him.
You know, when people talk about Patrice Lumumba or Kwame Nkrumah, for example, or Thomas Sankara, or even Sukarno, they always say that they were ahead of their time. But that's not true. They weren't ahead of their time. They were not revolutionary thinkers, if you know what I mean. They were just incredibly astute, mature, sensible men with a very crystal clear understanding about how things should be. They were nothing futuristic or utopian in their visions. They just understood and identified exactly what had been done to Africa and what was being done to Africa. And they understood exactly what liberation and what sovereignty required. You know, if they had been leaders in the West, no one would have called them revolutionary or even visionary. They just would have been regarded as logical, sound, rational, reasonable men who had an intricate understanding of economics and politics and basic fairness. I'm not saying this to slight them, not at all. I'm saying this to emphasize the heinous criminality of the Western power structure and how it has dealt with Africa.
Right.
Because if you were a leader in Africa in the 1950s, the 1960s, the 70s, or the 80s, and you had a sound mind, a rational mind, you had an understanding of politics and economics, and you had an understanding of what's required for sovereignty and fairness, well, that made you a revolutionary, calling for pursuing basic fairness and sovereignty and independence for an African leader, saying things and doing things and implementing policies that just made sense for your nation, constituted rebellion. No, they weren't ahead of their time. Time refused to advance. Time was being held back, especially in Africa. The West, Europe, the UK, and America refused to allow Africa to exist in the present day. Right. Not just Africa, of course, all across the global south. But nowhere was this more the case than in Africa. You understand? I pointed out before, more than once, relationships between countries, between continents, evolve and develop and change over time. We've seen drastic changes in international relationships in just the last 20 years. In fact, we've seen drastic changes in just the last 4 or 5 years.
Facts.
You know,
we have. We truly have.
But the West's relationship with Africa has remained essentially the same for 1,000 years. Subjugation and extraction, looting and pillage. So for Lumumba or Nkrumah, it was the 1960s, but for the West, it was still the 1860s, the 1760s, the 1660s. For the West, Africa was frozen in time, and they kept it frozen in time by force.
Sure have. They sure
By
did.
violence, by
The
assassination, by
The
coups,
oppressor.
by invasions,
They
and
are
by
the
hostage
oppressors.
governments and collaborators. They kept it frozen in time by predatory lending, by neoliberal policy coercion, by manufactured debt and abusive trade policies.
Facts.
You know, when they can't send soldiers, they send consultants. So no, those great leaders weren't ahead of their time. The West stopped time in Africa.
Thank you.
And understand this, when you arrest the forward movement of a people, when you stop them in time like that, you're not just stealing their wealth,
Facts.
you're stealing their future.
Facts.
You're robbing them of possibility. You're burying
Same thing they do
generations
to
that
their
have
own
not
American
even been
people.
born yet under the rubble of your exploitation. Because what could have been created, what could have been discovered, what could have been achieved, it never gets a chance to exist.
Facts.
The mind of Thomas Sankara, the determination of Patrice Lumumba,
Do the
vision of
same thing
Nkrumah,
to their
these
own
weren't
American
anomalies.
people.
They're the normal, natural, healthy state of a decolonized mind, of a liberated mind coming from a liberated people. They're examples of what Africa would have been, should have been, and inshallah, bi'ithnillah, still will be. But the West systematically crushed the conditions necessary even for normalcy to flourish.
Facts.
You see, you don't just
They doing it in their
kill the
own.
leaders when you kill the leaders or when you overthrow the leaders. You steal the future that those leaders could build. You know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran that when you kill one person unjustly, it's as if you killed all of mankind. But that isn't just metaphorically true. In the case of the leaders that the West has destroyed in Africa, they also destroyed millions of lives along with them. Millions of living and unborn lives have been destroyed in terms of their hopes, their opportunities, their rights, their freedom, their independence, their sovereignty. Well, you can trace the carnage going on right now in Congo today, all the way back to the assassination of Patrice Lumumba. They assassinate the idea. They assassinate the man who represents the idea, so that future generations will look back and go, well, you know, they tried and they failed, so we better not bother. It's psychological warfare across time.
It is.
Because if you can make a people believe that liberation is impossible, if you can make them believe that wanting
Facts.
sovereignty is naive and that dignity is an unrealistic hope, then you don't even have to conquer them anymore. They'll remain conquered inside themselves.
Amen.
And please understand, when we talk about people like Sankara, Nkrumah, Lumumba, Sukarno, we're actually just talking about the natural state of a decolonized mind. We're not talking about something extraordinary. We're talking about what's supposed to be normal, not exceptional, normal. They didn't have utopian visions for their countries, like I said. They wanted their countries to be normal. But the West would not allow it. And back then, the West had the power to prevent it. The relative power, that's the key point. They had the relative power to prevent it. They had the relative power to steal Africa's future by prolonging its past by force. But as I've talked about many times, the West's relative power is receding. That old wolf still has fangs, but the global South is raising some young lions of their own today. They're reviving the spirit of Lumumba and Sankara and Nkrumah. Your grip on Africa is being pried open. And yes, of course, I'm talking about Ibrahim Traore in Burkina Faso. And all the leaders in the Sahel Alliance countries, obviously, but especially Ibrahim Traore. You know, it's often only in retrospect that we recognize the magnitude of a figure.